Well, I think there's a number of ways of doing that. I mean, you could, if you just wanted to work abroad, you could go and work in a bar in Spain and still be using your Spanish. So that's at one level. That's fantastic experience too, by the way, because you are honing your language skills, you're getting to know a culture better. But if you want a truly international job, then again, there's two ways of doing that. Either plonk yourself overseas and get involved in different markets, or plonk yourself in the UK and get different markets. Different market experience, sorry. I think the most valuable thing is to try and get a kind of pan territory job of some sort, because you're going to be exposed to more markets. If you just go and work in one market, actually it's just like working in Britain, but it's in Germany. Yeah. It's kind of no different.
I would say from a practical perspective, when you are young, free and single, say, it's easier to move. Yeah. As soon as you start having kids and schooling and all the rest of it, it just becomes a little bit harder, and it probably becomes more costly for the company to shunt you around the world. So when you are young and flexible, you can put your hand up to go to all sorts of different places.
But if you don't have international experience yet, get some.
Okay.
Find some cross-cultural international experience. Go and live abroad. Work in a company that's very international.
Why would you say that?
Because it gives people, they just become more rounded in a way you just can't explain and define. Understanding, appreciation of other cultures, people that are different to them, people that think differently, act differently, have different religious beliefs.
There are some generic stuff that's the same everywhere, right? So people want to do a good job everywhere I've ever been. People love their families wherever I've been. You then get massive differences in different countries. Massive.
Yeah.
So what do I think? I don't think one size fits all. So when I was at Fujitsu, I had to go to Korea to launch the ICL way, right, which was an aspirational set of values. As soon as you got to Korea, it was obvious that the values that I was supposed to be training in were miles away from the values in Korea. Because it was, for us, it was things like individualism and bonus schemes, and you get paid for what you deliver personally. Well, in Korea, it's the exact opposite of that. It's about communal, it's about family, it's about the country. So if I'd have stood up and gone banging on and on and on about this Western individual culture, they would have just gone bleh.
Rebel, yeah.
Yeah. So it's picking up on that really quickly. That's where the differences are culturally. It's around big things, and then so what I don't think it is, and you have to be mindful of it, but I don't think it's it's about you have to learn how to shake hands, and that maybe my foot shouldn't be pointed. That stuff does matter. Like in Thailand, I think it is. I shouldn't show you the bottom of my foot. My experience of that is people don't care about that. They don't. They know that you're different and not from their country, and providing you're I don't want to sound like a crack record, but a decent, proper human being, doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't. What does matter is if you don't try to understand them.
I think travelling is another vital thing, that you will learn a lot through travelling. I really do believe that travelling is one of the best schools out there. And I remember when I was in the sixth form, my brother lived in Hong Kong. He moved to Hong Kong, and my father travelled a lot, and he was out in China. And so my mum and I wanted to go out to Hong Kong at the same time as my dad was in China, and we were going to meet up. I remember my mum and I going to meet with the headmaster to say, could we take 2 weeks off because blah, blah, blah. And he said, actually, I think Jill will learn a load more out in Hong Kong for 2 weeks than she will sitting in my school. And that really has stayed with me as well. And I think that's really powerful, that it's not just about sort of academic learning. I think you learn a lot of stuff by getting in different environments and pushing yourself out there. And that will help shape what you think you want to do.
There's sort of two ways of doing that, I suppose. One is to be a heavily expat, so you can go and you stay within the expat community, and there are some countries and places where you have to do that for language and culture and security issues. But those countries where you don't have those concerns, I think it's so much better if you can genuinely try at least to integrate yourself into the community. So in France, I lived amongst French people, not in a company sort of ghetto. I socialised with local people, with neighbours and stuff like that. It was not easy. I didn't really speak French until I joined Eurotunnel, so I spoke technical French. I could talk endlessly about building tunnels and laying railways and stuff like that, and talk in meetings with very, very narrow vocabulary. Then I'd turn up at a drinks party and I couldn't understand anything anybody was saying because it was all like normal everyday language. But forcing yourself to get into the culture, I think it's just a more personally rewarding thing. You just learn more about different cultures and people, which helps you back in your career, because nowadays, especially if you work, I don't know, for an international bank or, you know, big company, you are going to come across lots and lots of people, Italians and French and Germans and Americans and stuff like that. And if you try to manage them all the same way, you will fail, because they're all different. If you've had experience in their cultures and you know how Italians' minds work and what's important to them and culturally how they work, then I think you can you know, weave your path more productively in that environment. So I encourage people to travel. I encourage people to get properly into different cultures, because wherever they end up, that will help their careers, but it just helps your breadth of personal experience as a person to understand what makes different people tick.
You never quite settle down, I suppose, because you know you're not there forever.
Yeah.
And again, there's two sorts of things. That there were some people that kind of knew they weren't ever going to, they loved it, the sun was shining and they were never going to come home. But mostly, you know, you're there for 2 or 3 years, so you never quite settle. It really helps, in my experience, to be sporty.
Okay.
If there's another, so there's a language of family that's common around the world. There's a language of, are you a decent person or not, that's around the world, and then there's a language of sport. I was lucky, I happened to play badminton. I played senior badminton and stuff, and so in Asia I played badminton with them. I would go to the badminton club and be the only white face in the room.
Really?
Oh yeah, of about 200 people, and it was brilliant. But the thing was, I was as good as they were. And it can be golf, it can be rugby, it can be netball, it can be anything. The biggest shocks ever was America.
Oh, really?
Share the same language, share the same lots of different things. I found America to be the least welcoming. So, you know, in Hong Kong, people would always be inviting you out, you know, were you okay and stuff like that. In America, you'd go home and that's it, you went home. It's quite interesting. They weren't horrible and nasty. I mean, really, really nice people and everything. But there wasn't the same, maybe because we share the same language, they didn't think they had to look after you at all. It's quite interesting. You know, and I've been an expat a few times, and there's two sorts of expat. There's an expat that thinks it's a privilege to be in someone else's country and works really hard to understand it. And there's the lot that just wish they were still at home and moan because there's no Branston pickle and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the big challenges, along with the more prosaic stuff of having to pack up everything you own and ship it off or back every 3 years, which is a great impulse to ditching all the superfluous rubbish that most of us have that we don't need in our lives and in our homes. But again, in terms of recruiting for this sort of job, it's something to think about. People need to welcome that experience and welcome the experience of having to become an expert in a new area, a new country, a new issue at quite short order. Again, learning languages is a key part of that, so that you can insert yourself into a new society and understand it, not just at a linguistic level, but the language helps you understand the culture and the worldview and the thought processes, which are often very difficult very different to ours.